I do have this.
Thank you.
We're talking about solar. That's my electricity bill for. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Electoral Boundaries Commission meeting. My name is Justice Dallas Miller. I am the chairman of the commission, and I also serve as a justice of the Court of King's Bench in southern Alberta. Before you tonight, we don't have a full commission. John Evans is unavoidably absent. He will be joining us for tomorrow morning session, which will be at the Edmonton Inn in the other side of town. But our commission consists of, in addition to our absent John Evans, Susan Sampson, a longtime resident of Sylvan Lake, an experienced municipal councillor and former mayor of Sylvan Lake. She was named Citizen of the Year several years ago of Sylvan Lake and also received the Queen Elizabeth Medal for volunteer service back in 2012. Susan's a very dedicated volunteer in the Sylvan Lake area, especially in the area of focusing on public health care. To my immediate right is Dr. Julian Martin, a retired professor from the University of Alberta. And by the way, you can see all of the full bios on the website, so I'm just being very cryptic or brief in the introduction. Julian has volunteered on many committees in the Sherwood Park area and served on provincial tribunals such as the Surface Rights Board and the Land Compensation Board. At the end of the table is Greg Clark, an entrepreneur and consultant, and someone that is involved in the information and knowledge management areas. Greg has served one term as a member of the legislature of Alberta, representing Calgary-Elbow, where he resides. Greg is also recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Platinum Jubilee Medal and serves as chair of the Balancing Pool. Greg holds an MBA and Institute of Corporate Director Certificate as well. We are your Electoral Boundaries Commission. So we are looking forward to this evening. We served all day today, heard a lot of really good submissions and presentations, and we've learned a lot about Edmonton so far, especially those of us who are not from the capital region. Julian probably didn't learn as much today as the rest of us did, but it was a very good long day. A couple of pointers. Can you please silence your cell phones? You know, turn them off, just silence them for this evening. And if you have a written submission that you want us to keep, just provide it to Aaron Roth here, who is standing up. He's the clerk of our committee, and he helps the trains run on time, so to speak, for us. Before I open it up for presentations, I want to take a moment and just remind you that we are an independent commission established by the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, and we have a couple of tasks this year in our job as Electoral Boundaries Commission. First of all, we have been instructed through the legislation to provide for boundaries for 89 electoral districts, not 87. So the province is enlarging the Legislative Assembly from 87 members to 89. In terms of giving you some background for our timeline, the committee was announced and appointed in late March. And once we're appointed, we're on a bit of a timeline, a legislative timeline. So we met a couple of times throughout April as a commission of 5 members with staff from Elections Alberta and the Legislative Assembly Office. And we are now meeting, starting last week through to the end of June. We're meeting across the province and hearing submissions. And the rest of the week, we have one more day in Edmonton tomorrow, and then we go to West Loch and St. Paul. And so we try to cover as much of the province as we can. We will end our public hearings at the end of June. We will deliberate, and then we are tasked with providing a report to the Speaker of the Legislature no later than October 28th. That report has been termed an interim report, and that will be released to the public, and there will be an opportunity for public response and input to that interim report, and we will conduct further public hearings based on that report. The dates are not clear yet, but probably late November, throughout December and January and February. Then we must submit a final report to the Speaker of the Legislature by late March 2026. When we do our report, we're guided by several factors. As I said, we're going to be moving from 87 districts to 89, and population is also a big factor. Population changes have taken place in Alberta, and that's not new to anyone in this room, I'm sure. But to give you some perspective, the population estimated back in the 2017 Electoral Boundaries Report was just over 4 million people. In fact, it was 4,082,609 people in Alberta, and that's population, not voters. The formula that was used by the last commission, of course, was that population divided by 87, left a target or a median amount of population for each electoral district of 46,697, with a target range ranging from those figures that you see on the slide, from 35,000 approximately to 58,000. That was 2017, and again, that was based on just over 4 million people. If you look at the numbers we're using for this commission, we are using a figure of 4.88 million people. And if we take 89 electoral districts and divide the population by that number, the mean number is 54,929, with a range, as you can see, from just over 41,000 to as high as almost 69,000 for the targeted range. And of course, that population isn't distributed evenly in one part of the across the province, so we have to deal with how we're going to apportion the ridings based on that population increase. The task of our commission is not to carve the province up into perfect 89 districts with the exact same number, but we are to provide electoral boundaries that provide what's come to be known in the Canadian parlance as effective representation. When we do that, we consider several factors. First, the relative density and sparsity of population in the regions, common community interests and organizations, and we've heard a lot about that in Edmonton today. Geographic features, which is more of a factor, which is a factor in the cities, but it's also a factor in the countries, more of a factor in the rural areas. Communication lines and transportation lines across the province is also a factor, and these are all factors mentioned in the legislation. We're also mandated and required to come up with understandable and clear boundaries, and that can be a challenge at times, we're learning. And there's a catch-all provision in the legislation that provides for other appropriate factors that we glean either from public hearings or from the data and submissions that we have gained over the course of our hearings. So now, at this stage, is the time we want to hear from you as participants who have signed up for the presentations. And here. Oh, good. And sorry, we do have maps. If you want to refer to maps, anybody who's presenting, I can't control that. They don't let the chairman of the commission in charge of that sensitive data. Somebody else will have to bring those maps up. So, given those comments, we've got a fairly full list tonight. Not all the presenters are here, but I believe the first two presenters are here. Elizabeth Straight. In the communication that you've received from the commission, you probably were told that we are limiting presentations to 7 minutes with about 3 minutes of question and answer. You can be assured that we're not strictly enforcing that timeline, so if we're not going to cut you off right at the 7-minute mark. So please tell us your name and what riding or constituency you're from.
My name is Elizabeth Strange. I currently live in the Edmonton-Glenora riding, okay. But I was born and raised in Medicine Hat. So part of my presentation is going to be about Medicine Hat, getting a little bit of a preview for your future appearance in Medicine Hat. By way of background, I currently work as a lawyer. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Human Rights and Gender Studies with minors in Anthropology and Sociology, a Bachelor of Law, and a Master's of Law. And after my university degrees, I moved back to Medicine Hat as an adult to work in refugee resettlement for 2 years. So I'm going to touch on 3 themes. One is the number of seats, which I know you cannot change that it's 89, but I'd like the record to reflect my interest in there being more seats. Seat distribution and seat boundaries, specifically about Medicine Hat. So addressing the number of seats, while again, I recognize this body can't add additional seats, it's an important issue that should be addressed. Bill 31 in 2024 increased the seat count from 87 to 89. The last seat count increase was in 2012, from 83 to 87. Since 2012, the Alberta population has increased by 1 million. 1 million more Albertans, but only 2 more seats. From 1986 to 2012, when the seat count went from 83 to 87, the population increased by 1.5 million. When you distribute that out into Albertans per MLA, the new seat count will have approximately 56,000 Albertans per MLA. 2012, that was 44,500. 1986, it was 28,000 Albertans per MLA. So we have many Albertans who are being underrepresented or unrepresented simply because of the number of MLAs. In future legislation, there needs to be an increase in seats to reflect the population growth. Now turning to seat distribution. New seats must be added where population has grown. The statistics show that that is in South Edmonton and North Calgary. And I'd also like to state that people vote, not land. So while I'm sure that in many of the rural areas, you'll hear that the seats are too large geographically, the reality is that is the way that rural Alberta is. And it's important to ensure that the seat distribution reflects where people live, not where there is land. And while I have the utmost respect for the MLAs who represent the rural ridings and the difficult challenges that they face with a riding that spans 4 or 5 hours from border to border. We also must recognize that MLAs 100 years ago represented large rural areas. The Peace River riding is essentially the same as it's been since Alberta was created. But now we have the benefit of modern technology to allow the MLAs to better represent those rural areas. So I would like to see the Commission not be pressured to make the rural ones smaller simply because it's inconvenient for an MLA to do that travel work. We need to ensure that the MLAs are representing the people. Now, finally, turning to my hometown of Medicine Hat. In the last seat redraw, Medicine Hat got the short end of the stick in many, many ways. As you can see in the map, Medicine Hat is divided by the South Saskatchewan River. The last commission redrew the line, dividing what was a urban Medicine Hat riding and then a rural Cypress Medicine Hat riding into 2 urban rural ridings. The boundary is not the river, though. The current boundary is 3 blocks south of the river and then this weird triangle. The map I've provided for you is from the city of Medicine Hat and shows you the neighborhoods. The current line divides some of the neighborhoods. The downtown and Herald neighborhoods are divided in half. I volunteered in the last 2 elections, and the number of voters who were confused why they'd always voted in the Cypress Medicine Hat riding and now they're part of Brooks Medicine Hat, or they're part of Medicine Hat and now they're part of Cypress Medicine Hat, just a confusion. I would like to see Medicine Hat stuck together as one urban riding again. Given the numbers you provided at the start, the population of Medicine Hat is approximately 63,000. So it's in range for the entirety of the urban center to be one riding. If the Commission needs to divide Medicine Hat, I would propose that it simply be by the river. That is a very clear geographical landmark in the city. Medicine Hat does the north, south, east, west on addresses, way better than Edmonton does. If you're north of the river, your address is a north address. You're south of the river, your address is a south address. If you have to get a little bit of like fiddling to get some neighborhoods to add up to the right number, I recommend River Ridge and Riverside being with the south side riding. River Ridge is essentially a retirement community. It doesn't have a huge population. I think it's approximately 700. And Riverside is one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city, oldest alongside downtown Herald and River Flats. So historically, it makes sense for Riverside to be with the south side. Also, there is a thick line on the map that divides like Riverside from northwest Crescent Heights. That is a very steep hill. That is, again, geographically significant in the city. I don't think I have anything else to say.
Did you do any checking as to the population in River Ridge and Riverside?
Yes. So River Ridge, from the statistics I could find, River Ridge has a population of 476. It's very small. Okay. And Riverside is 1,950. So if you did north of the river, it would be a total of 16,570 in the city. Obviously, you've got Red Cliff nearby, and depending on how far the riding goes, you end up including Suffield, potentially Brooks. South of the river, just the neighborhoods that are in Medicine Hat south of the river, is 46,430. If you were to do south of the river plus River Ridge and Riverside, the riding would be 48,856.
Okay. So you're suggesting the municipal boundaries of the city of Medicine Hat be one constituency. Get rid of Brooks and get rid of the Cypress part and
let that be a rural riding.
Okay.
That encompasses those areas.
Okay.
I should also note, the areas of the city that have the most growth is the south side. So the areas that are noted as future development, it's mostly the south side. I'm sure when you get down to Medicine Hat, they'll tell you the joke about Burnside. It's been flagged for development for 100 years, and it can't actually be developed in residential. So all of the development is going to be on the south side. The south side will continue to grow, whereas the north side has very limited growth potential.
Okay. Any questions?
Yes.
I'm curious about what you might call a sister town that's immediately on your flank, namely Red namely Redcliffe. Now, what in your mind distinguishes that sufficiently that it should be excluded from your scenario?
So one is obviously the municipal boundaries. People know if they live in Medicine Hat or they live in Redcliffe. I can tell you by way of background, I used to be the curator of the Redcliffe Museum, and it is culturally significantly different. The fact that I was a Hatter that was the curator of the Redcliffe Museum was not the most positively received. So Redcliffe is definitely, it's got a distinct culture, distinct history. I think the other thing is simply that looking at the numbers of what these ridings are going to be, the city of Medicine Hat is kind of perfectly in range to just be a riding. We don't need to mess around with adding Redcliffe. Don't need to mess around with adding Vinerville, which is right nearby as well, or Dunmore. Let's just leave the city as the city.
Great.
Yeah, no, I thank you very much. I appreciate it. You preempted my question by asking if we needed to put some together. I guess I don't really understand Cypress County, and that's part of the feedback that we've received in some of the written submissions is sort of what logically belongs with other places, and I've got a list of a couple of other spots here. Redcliffe being one of them, but you know, some of those other more outlying areas. Maybe I'll just ask a general question then. Why do you feel it's important to have, like, what's distinct about Medicine Hat as a city from its surrounding areas? I mean, a lot of the people who live around the edges or outside of Medicine Hat, even quite a distance away, I imagine would come into Medicine Hat and for the shopping and maybe work and, you know, recreation or whatever it may be, and perhaps vice versa a little bit as well. But maybe you can just speak to why you feel like Medicine Hat as a city or a portion thereof should be its own constituency.
Okay. So part of it is, like I said, just the ease of having the city boundaries as pre-existing, that people understand. People know if they live in Medicine Hat or they don't live in Medicine Hat. It's something that it can clearly be articulated to the voters that they will understand. Being someone that was born and raised in Medicine Hat, I can tell you that there is a distinction between being an urban Hatter versus being from the rural. Like, there is a degree of an affinity, like you go to the hospital if you're from rural, but the people in the rural regions, they feel like they're separate. I would say that's more of what it is that the rural area surrounding Medicine Hat, they feel like they have more of a unique identity that the urban people in Medicine Hat would not understand and don't have the same concerns, interests. So there's obviously a bleed over of commonality, especially when you're talking about the fact that the nearest big city is 3 hours away. People are coming into Medicine Hat for those services. But equally, I mean, Medicine Hat's so close to the Saskatchewan border. Arguably, people that are in Cypress County have way more in common with people across the Saskatchewan border than they do with people within the city limits of Medicine Hat.
Thank you.
Just a comment. Our data for Census Canada for 2024 shows the city of Medicine Hat having a population of 67,909, so almost 68,000. And, you know, our number is 55,000 plus or minus 25% variance. And I think that we have been leaning towards, based on past reports, not to be as high as 25%. And so I guess that's just a red flag. Like I understand what you're saying, but we do have that one red flag. I don't know if anybody else on the table wants to comment on that with that number.
That is why I said, if you're going to draw a line, let it be the river or let it be River Ridge and Riverside with the south.
Okay, so if we don't recommend the complete city as a riding, are you content with Brooks being part of the north part of the city, which, as I understand it, is now, and it was as a result of the 2017 commission? and what's below the river or under the river, basically Medicine Hat Cypress or Cypress Medicine Hat?
What I would prefer to see is south of the river, the city limit. That would be the population to get you a riding, and then Cypress Medicine Hat to encompass the north part of the river. So like what it essentially used to be was that the city was Medicine Hat, and then south of Highway 1 was Cypress Medicine Hat, but Cypress Medicine Hat looped around. And so included, I think, as far as Bizano, but not as far as Brooks. So I think that would be more appropriate because Brooks is, it's its own city. It's not as big, so it has to be in with something. But it's an hour and a half away with a very different culture and very different entity.
Yeah. And you did highlight the confusion, which I know. I have family in Medicine Hat. They talk about the confusion of the boundaries. That's for sure. Julie?
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to pick up a point you had just made, actually, and I want you to tell me about CFB Suffield.
Okay.
Those people presumably, when they're allowed off base, they actually come to the Hat to shop and to play and stuff like that. So you find that a beneficial relationship with the businesses in town to have the base there?
So interesting question. I basically grew up on base. My father was a defense scientist, and I worked on the base for many years. So yes, the people that are on base actually tend to live in Medicine Hat because the Canadian soldiers, if they're stationed there, they tend to actually live in Medicine Hat. There's not very much British there anymore, but they do shop in Medicine Hat. There is a beneficial relationship. The Medicine Hat economy is very much based on that military base. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think you answered it more fulsomely than I had expected, and it raises more questions really because it does. If Medicine Hat is an economic engine and magnet, so to speak, for people who are on the base, then we have to consider that as a factor in favor of you having a rural hinterland, as it were. But by the same token, you don't want it with respect to Redcliffe.
Well, like the thing is Redcliffe actually has not a huge population, but it's got thousands of people, whereas CFB Suffield is not.
Right.
If you're going to stretch the riding to encompass CFB Suffield and the town of Suffield and the town of Ralston, that would be fine, but you're not really adding that many people into that riding by doing that. Whereas including Redcliffe into the Medicine Hat riding, that is increasing the number quite significantly.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Granger. Thank you for your loyalty to your hometown.
Thank you so much.
Karen Sticks.
So good evening. My name is Karen Sticks. I'm a CPA of some length, and I am a constituency member of Edmonton South, and I also live in McGrath, which is the very northern tip of Edmonton South. Now, like my predecessor here, I believe in the boundaries as being defined by rivers, major roadways such as the Anthony Henday, ravines, because it just seems to draw an appropriate boundary and how the community has been developed. Now, I do understand that Edmonton South is possibly up for a division or reallocation, because it is one of the fastest growing areas in the province. While I have my opportunity, I would like to express that McGrath and McTaggart belong north of the Anthony Henday, based on longevity in the city, based on the community amenities that exist north of the Henday as opposed to south of the Henday. I just think they're a much better mix with either Edmonton Riverbend or Edmonton Rutherford. I meant to say Edmonton Whitemud or Edmonton Rutherford. Right. So that's the simple presentation I have. It's not complicated. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I myself did some, I ran in the last election as a candidate in Edmonton South, and I wasn't the successful candidate, but I myself, when I was door knocking, I noticed the real difference in the communities, and so I make that suggestion to you.
Just before I open it up for questions, I just want to give you the figures that we have. So in 2017 report relied for Edmonton South on a population base of 45,801, almost 46,000. Population that we'll be using for our report is 81,077. So that is a huge, another riding on very well. So is that the regions or the areas that you suggested we take out of Edmonton South? Did you do a verification as to how many people were in those areas?
I have a pretty good sense. I know McGrath. Well, no, I don't have specific numbers to share with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but those regions are McGrath
and McTaggart. And if you look on the map there, you can see that they jut up above the Anthony Henday.
Oh yeah. Okay. So everything above the Anthony Henday in Edmonton South.
Yeah, you could easily cut out, and it would fit quite easier with one of the other constituency associations that exist.
Okay.
You got more? Sorry, I'm being a little cheeky. Sorry.
Yeah.
I guess what I mean is
you want more numbers.
That would, yeah. I know. I say that. And I apologize if that came off as flippant, but I certainly didn't mean it that way.
Well,
it's really about. Sorry. Yes, I've just done a little magic on my machine here, and that top left little slice there is about 9,000 people or so.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And as Justice Miller said, we're quite a ways over, and we're aiming for about 55, 56.
I can give you another roadway, such as Calgary Trail. That's a pretty key roadway that you could take that group of people, the Summerside people, and put them further east.
Okay. And is Ellerslie Road a sort of a natural boundary south of Henday as well?
It's a soft natural boundary, but I mean, it could be used, but it's not as significant as the Anthony Henday. Those people there do belong in Edmonton South. I wouldn't necessarily group them up above, but you could if you really wanted to. You've got Blackmud Creek. They would serve well up above too. I think that's reasonable what you're suggesting. So the Calgary Trail, the Ellerslie Road, noting the Anthony Henday as being another significant boundary. You can see the Whitemud Creek and the ravines as well as demarking the areas. There's been significant growth south of the Ellerslie Road. So that's also where you're seeing your significant numbers. And so that's why I suggest the Calgary Trail as your demarcation as well. That would maybe cut out some of those. And 41st Avenue used to be city boundaries. Now, of course, it's Highway 19. There's significant growth past 41st Avenue. But mainly, I think you've covered it. If you try to add up, what are you looking for numbers? You're looking for about 30,000?
Yeah, well, and then planning for future growth. This is also the challenge. We'd like to
maybe 40.
Again, I used this earlier today, but as a Calgarian, one of my favorite Edmontonian quotes is "skate to where the puck is going to be," as opposed to where it is. So that's looking at Edmonton South and Southwest, and there's obviously a lot of growth and has, as Justice Miller said. So we would, if we can, like to accommodate for that as well. So just any thoughts if as to what belongs with what is really what we're interested in.
Yeah, I think just really watching for the roadways and the ravines and the rivers, as was previously mentioned. We've covered off on Ellerslie Road, we've covered off on Calgary Trail. We know McGrath and McTaggart just don't belong. That's my main consideration right now, because that's where I live. I'm most concerned about that. Okay, that's
helpful.
What about the name?
Yeah.
We had an interesting discussion this afternoon about the name, and somebody said Edmonton Southwest, Edmonton South is boring. The name. We need to liven the name up.
Yeah, well, and it's tough because if you call it Edmonton South, that sort of encompasses the whole thing. I haven't given that any significant thought. What have you come up with for some ideas?
So somebody suggested Edmonton Heritage Valley for the South. Oh,
Heritage Valley for the South. Okay, well that then is one of the neighborhoods, and so it's a little bit unfair that way. But you could maybe take a couple of the neighborhoods and hyphenate it.
Okay.
Something like that. I don't have great ideas on that.
Okay.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you.
Hey.
And please stay for the rest, because sometimes we have time at the end that we like to have a fulsome discussion, conversation. Jerry Gill. No. Bob Patterson. Yeah. Yeah, please have a seat.
Hi, my name is Bob Patterson, and I am a volunteer and board member with the Edmonton-McClung UCP Constituency Association. I've been on that board for 3 or 4 years, hold a number of positions. I want to thank the Electoral Board Commission for this opportunity, and I wanted to give a shout out. I've spent a career in media, statistics and presentations, and I just want to kudos to the team that built that website, because it is a very, very useful tool for people just like us. And I am referring to the numbers almost directly out of that website when I'm presenting these numbers to you, and after consultation with your administrator to confirm how we are using the population numbers and how we're arriving at that. This is a pretty simple exercise, and we're here to address one of the main concerns that you've already addressed here 2 or 3 times, the rapid growth of the city of Edmonton to Edmonton South and Edmonton Southwest. Edmonton-McClung is positioned, for the most part, on the northern tip of Edmonton South and Edmonton Southwest, and our 2 key main boundaries are the Edmonton-Whitemud Freeway, and to our north, we have a couple of pieces of just immediately north of Edmonton-Whitemud. There's a map there that will benefit you for the existing riding constituency, and that number of 49,227 is directly off the AEBC website, and is consistent with how we're extrapolating the StatsCan numbers. That number is about 10% below the target ratio quotient of 55,000 per riding. So this is a very simple exercise of dealing with a very mature part of the city that is Edmonton-McClung. We're a very mature neighborhood, and we are looking to add some of the more mature neighborhoods out of Edmonton South and Edmonton Southwest. I've listed those those communities there with the exact numbers. Our recommendation is to, for the most part, take almost directly out of Edmonton South and Edmonton Southwest, with a goal of getting to approximately 63,000 for Edmonton McClung. And that would include us moving the small neighborhood of West Meadowlark, which is in the northeastern tip of our current riding map. And our recommendation is to move that to Edmonton Riverview. Edmonton Riverview's current number is around 50,000. So if we put 3,500 into Edmonton Riverview, it gets it close to the average of 55,000. Edmonton South Southwest is at 81,000. Edmonton Southwest is at 76,000. Our proposal is to take about 17,000 all told out of there.
Combined.
Yeah. Yeah. And giving you a spreadsheet of how we've broken those numbers down. And if you look at the new proposed map, it's pretty simple. We're using my esteemed colleague before was talking about the transportation boundary of the Anthony Henday and the White Mud. And so the Anthony Henday, two communities that touch on the south side are Jameson Place and Cameron Heights. Both those communities are now quite mature, and they fall within Edmonton Southwest. And our recommendation is that we move them into Edmonton McClung because all the shopping facilities are there, the community rinks, the school zones, et cetera, and the same for Glastonbury and Granville, which are on the west side of the new west side of the map that I've drawn. And so this essentially is take a small center-driven riding, take from the south, take a little bit from the southwest, bump us up to around 63,000. I realize that that's about 15% over the median average, but considering how the city is going to grow, this isn't about the next electoral map. What this look like 3 elections from now, right? So yeah, we would be slightly above the 55,000 threshold, but our recommendation is that it's all tightly in one spot, easy for an MLA to effectively represent that community, all the members in that community, all of the suggested new communities. We all use the same facilities. We shop in the same place. We go to the same schools. We use the same recreation facilities. It's pretty simple.
Nicely laid out.
Yes.
I appreciate the diagrams because it's pretty clear.
Yeah. And
Especially for us.
I realize that this is a municipal issue and is not to be of concern for this committee necessarily, but that red X, that big red X area, that is what we refer to as West Meadowlark. There's about 3,300 people in that community, and they're all dealing with the same thing, which is the extension of the LRT to West Edmonton. So people immediately east of that community are dealing with that. And so everyone in Edmonton Riverview are dealing with the issue of extension of the LRT to West Edmonton. And I believe that if we move that West Meadowlark community, even though it is a municipal issue, there's provincial funding, there's federal funding for that, and it ends up on an MLA plate and will for the next several years. If you've ever tried to drive by there with the current LRT construction, it's a nightmare. So that's our proposal.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? Yeah, Julian.
Thank you very much. Excellent to see a proposal laid out with options and the like. And having done this, you will appreciate the kind of difficulties the commission goes through with every scenario that comes before us. I had a couple of specific questions for you because in some of your options, you talk about bringing in or not bringing in Patricia Heights, Rio Terrace.
So I apologize. I realize that. So Patricia Heights is on the northern, or it's on the outer edge of this of my map, and I didn't do a very good job of including that inside of my map.
I read the footnote. It's okay.
Yeah. our recommendation would be to bring in Patricia Heights, specifically because the school zones between Patricia Heights and Wolf Willow, the kids go back and forth for school there.
Sure they do.
Yeah.
But that brings me to my second question, which is that there's no road across the ravine, so you got to go out on the white mud and then scoot back in again. And you're comfortable with that scenario vis-a-vis this, but you know, your district is heavily impacted by the White Mud Freeway.
It is.
And yet you are comfortable to take in Aldergrove and so on, and Misericordia out there in East Meadowlark and the like. And so do you see a commonality with those neighborhoods north of the freeway?
In fairness, that's a fair question. We were looking at this of sort of the boundary of using 178th Street, which is on the east side of West Edmonton Mall.
Yeah.
And as I should state that I've lived in this riding for 35 years. I'm right in the heart of this riding, and I've been dealing with all of the relative construction that's happened for the last 35 years. We this was logistically about making the math work for the commission to make this easy for you. Technically, looking at this, yeah, it would make sense to jettison Belmead, Aldergrove to the north and possibly pick up stuff from the south. But immediately, this would be a minor change to those ridings, to those constituents west of 178th Street, or on the west side of West Edmonton Mall. And we go north and south there. It's part of our life. Someone who lives in that area, for example, they would be going to Collingwood Shopping Center, the rec center, you know, and possibly even the Oscar Romero High School that's right there. We've got so those people on the north side of the White Mud Freeway still use those community infrastructure that's on 178th Street in the Collingwood area.
If I may, I'd just like to follow on. You suggest Jameson Place and Wedgwood Heights, and also Cameron Heights. Now, that's a sticky one because just like Rio Terrace, Cameron Heights can only be accessed from outside your riding. So, I mean, I get it. There's a certain community of interest for the people who live there because you're overlooking the river. It's all lovely. So what's the difference? But the only roadway is the Henday.
Well, yeah, but whether you go north or whether you go south or whether you go west, you're you know, so there's more affinity because there's as many people coming out of Cameron Heights using the shopping area of Hawkstone, which is on Lessard Road.
Okay.
Right? So it's so easy to get out of Cameron Heights to Hawkstone. It would be less than a 10-minute drive.
Okay.
Right?
That's an excellent answer.
There's also, and so I didn't list all of those type of things inside of this presentation because I figured we would probably speak to the logistical aspects of why. And there's also a fairly significant professional building inside of that Hawkstone Community Center as well. Like there's dentists and doctors and massage therapists, et cetera, that would be used not only by Cameron Heights, obviously Jameson Place, but Glastonbury and Granville as well on the west side of the Henday.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Just, I guess, and again, thank you so much for going to the trouble of doing all the data and details. It really is helpful. And I'm curious, I mean, 63,000 is quite a bit over, as you say, and with growth, it may sort of normalize over time. But if we needed to aim just a little lower, if we were to say, let's just reduce that number by, say, 3,000 to 5,000, give or take.
We could keep Patricia Heights where it is currently, and that number would be 61,000. Which is closer to 60 than not.
And sorry, just so I'm following along.
Yeah, so
Patricia Heights is currently...
it's currently on the northeast edge of my map that I didn't do a very good job of including because the current boundary goes almost directly through it.
Yeah.
So it's a small community. If we left it where it was, we would be down to 61,000.
And that's currently Riverview.
Correct.
And again, I'm also interested partly in mathematics or the arithmetics of it, but also just kind of the neighborhoods that sort of belong together. Partly what Dr. Martin said.
I should mention that I have a couple of volunteers off our board that are here with me as well. Our CA president Margaret Vernick and my colleague Danny Heikkinen, and we argued over. We literally had a calculator out, and we were adding and then we put this into a spreadsheet and said, okay, what do we think? What do we think makes sense for Edmonton McClung 10, 15, 20 years out? Knowing that, we know that the average quotient is 55,000. That's your target range. But you're already 45% over in Edmonton Southwest, and you're 50% over Edmonton South. So even if to whittle those down, you're going to have to take some significant numbers out. This calculation should help you with that.
Yeah. I mean, I take it that the last commission faced the problem of believe it or not having enough people in Edmonton Southwest. Now we're faced with the consequence of time affecting this. So, it seems intuitively right that all the stuff in the lower part of Lessard Road would come back into your riding. Yeah.
I didn't want to talk history because what happened before didn't really matter. I mean,
I'm a historian, so I'm not sure.
But in the sense, I didn't go back a ton. But in 2010, Cameron Heights and Jameson Place were part of this riding.
Well, Yeah.
I
think it was just taken to make the numbers work, and now we're in a situation where we can re-examine that decision.
And here I am helping you make the numbers work.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yes.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for the visual aid.
Oh, you're very welcome.
You don't know how valuable that is after we hear ours. Kudos to the team because I stole these maps directly. I'm not sure if I should be saying that, but I plagiarized your website and used your data.
That's what it's for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we will pass on your commendation to those who designed the website. None of us here had any role in that, so don't.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Jody. Jody, it's not your last name, it's the handwriting of Mr. Ross that I'm having trouble with. So please introduce yourself.
Good evening. I'm Jody Callahoo Stonehouse. I'm the MLA for Edmonton Rutherford.
Welcome.
Lovely to meet all of you. You've got some work on your hands for the next little while, so thank you for taking this on. Edmonton Rutherford, as I was listening, I was thinking I would be willing to surrender the name because Rutherford actually isn't in my constituency. They're in Southwest. So you could just take my name and we could go with one of the lovely Indigenous names in my constituency, such as Sweetgrass or Blue Quill. I would like to brag. I think I have the loveliest constituency. In fact, I think I have the most post-secondary degrees in all of Alberta in my constituency. And our boundaries, we're a little less. I think we're about a few numbers less than most. Gateway, Anthony Henday, the creek is one of the natural boundaries. And so you can see there's just lovely older neighborhoods in my community and my constituency. So I'm not opposed to us growing because that's part of life. Things shift and change. In fact, I'm quite pleased to see that we're going to be doing some shifting. This is important. I would urge the commission to keep The rural and urban space is distinct, as we have found infrastructure needs, transportation needs are very different. For me, though, one of the most, if I can bring a message, one of the most problematic situations that I've overcome while traveling across Alberta is, for example, in Musqueam, the First Nation there, they have 4 different polls that those communities go to. And so when we think about the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, and we think about democracy as something we want to invite people to, we know that on First Nations, 90% is unemployment rate, which means people don't have a lot of income. So to do such subtle things like go voting means you're going to call someone, can you give me a ride, more than likely? Can I catch a ride, or are you going to town? And so if that community is divided by 4 places to vote, that puts a lot of people who don't have access to actual voting. And so I would urge this commission to look closely at also the Métis settlements and the First Nations, that we are keeping them together, as more often than not, the needs of those communities will be better represented and reflected with one representative in the legislature rather than being divided. So that's really all I wanted to bring to you today. My constituency is older, the infrastructure is older, but we're a smaller constituency, so I'm okay with growing, although I do door knock, just to give you a heads up. Don't make it too big. And thank you for your work, and if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Could you just identify that other constituent that you...
So the Musqueam gets divided into...
And where?
So Wetaskiwin. And Drayton Valley is also part of it. So it gets quite... And Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation is also divided into 3 different areas. So we're talking about a really small community that gets divided into 3 voting spaces, which makes it, you know, complex for families and daughters and sons when you all are intermarried and live in the same community. So I would urge you to really look at that critically, please.
Can we, I just got Massachusetts, Wetaskiwin up here.
Yeah.
And it looks like it goes all the way south of Leduc, south of Strathcona County, not quite to Camrose, and it has Ermineskin Nation, Montana, Louisville, all that is all part of it. And then over in Pigeon Lake, also that's included.
Yeah.
So that's the Pigeon Lake, Mamio Beach area. So those are the groups that I see that are on my map as Indigenous communities. Are there others you feel we should add to that, or I'm curious? I just want to make sure I understand where the break is, and they're voting in different places.
Alexis as well, Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation.
Okay.
I believe they're divided into Lac St. Anne and then Sturgeon and maybe Drayton Valley.
Yeah, I think that's right. They're mostly in the Lac St. Anne parkland riding.
But it's a very small community.
Yeah.
And so that means dividing people up in a community.
If I may, I think this is a really interesting theme. You know, the commission is heading east over the next for the back end of this week. So we're going to, I hope, meet a lot of people out of the Métis settlements on the eastern flank of the province, because this is an important theme to understand. I mean, this is a very interesting logistical point. How do you get to a poll station? Do we have a mobile poll? You know, those kind of questions might interest Elections Alberta as much as because they could actually do something about it. But maybe we need to make recommendations around those sorts of things.
I would implore you to do so, please.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just say in defense of history that Rutherford was the first mayor. So I can see why they decided to give him a name, right?
It doesn't have to be that same spot.
But there's also Rutherford below me, which is confusing for folks.
So some developer did that.
Yes. I didn't do it. Thank you. I appreciate
Okay, well,
it
thank you for
very much.
coming.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, there's some demon in your computer that makes the print so small. And Yavinder Bardwaj? No, okay. Nicole Hughes? Mr. Break? Okay. Oh, that's our break time. Okay, so our break is to be at 8 o'clock, so we're a little early. Is there someone, maybe we can move somebody up. Robert Jarman, scheduled to come at 8:20. Stefan Rates, Stephen Rates. Charlene Bozak. Okay. Anybody else here scheduled to present? I can hear you before the break. Okay. Well, maybe we'll break back early.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll be back at 7:50.
So it's interesting
10-2.
on sort of the Indigenous
Okay, good evening again. We're just returning after our break, and I understand we have a scheduled presenter that just arrived. Ms. Charlene Bozak, you're scheduled to present at 8:40, but we're prepared to come hear you or have you heard now. And you may have seen some requirements that you're restricted to a 7-minute presentation. We'll be flexible and let you go longer.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Charlene Bozak, and I have been a resident in the riding of Edmonton Highlands, Norwood for nearly 10 years. The riding in which I live is a diverse area that supports people from many cultural, socioeconomic, and ethnic backgrounds. Our neighborhoods are tree-lined, what some people might call mature neighborhoods. The communities within the Edmonton Highlands Norwood riding share resources and celebrations. Excuse me. From the Kaleido and Deep Freeze festivals in and around Alberta Avenue, to the Highlandia Festival in Highlands, to the dog park in Eastwood, to pub nights in Parkdale. We celebrate the arts and culture of our friends and neighbors, and you will find many of us at various communities. Supporting tax clinics, cooking and art classes, and other social events. We overlap and supplement each other in many ways. When searching for a new home in 2016, my husband and I specifically selected the area because we love the trees, value the commitment to community, and want to contribute to the revitalization of a vibrant area. And while suburban areas offer newer homes and other amenities, mature neighborhoods and ridings, like ours, have their own personalities. With this in mind, I encourage the Commission to maintain ridings like Edmonton Highlands, Norwood, and other mature neighborhoods as they currently exist. Our populations remain relatively stable, and we share commonality in our municipal, provincial, and federal funding needs. And we have demographic and geographic similarities. Additionally, as a longtime resident of the City of Edmonton, I understand our city is growing and a new riding is needed to support the growing communities in the southern part of our city. I encourage the Commission to continue the tradition of respecting municipal boundaries when creating a new riding for our city or any municipality. Our city limits may be inching ever closer to our surrounding neighborhoods like Leduc, Nisku, St. Albert, and Sherwood Park, but every municipality has a unique set of needs that is best addressed as a whole or shared with like neighbors in size, agricultural, industrial, or commercial demographics. Keeping Edmonton's and Calgary's ridings within its municipal boundaries respects the unique requirements of our city and also importantly of its neighbors like Leduc, Beaumont, and Drayton Valley, Devon. Recognizing and respecting municipal boundaries allows our cities and towns to be empowered to negotiate in the best interests of their residents, as it ensures our areas have representation specific to our needs. I thank the Commission for its time and efforts in this important democratic process. Your hard work and dedication ensure all Albertans have fair and equitable representation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
Thank you very much.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
I have a question before I forget it, so I just wanted to jump in. I appreciate your description of your electoral district. The blue chair isn't in your riding, is it?
It's in Riverdale. I think it's a little further south than us.
Okay. The way you described it reminded me of that. And I'm not from Edmonton. But when you describe it as a mature riding, I'm looking at the population statistics. In 2017 Electoral Boundary Commission, the population was 43,550. Or, yes, those are right there.
Yeah.
Or 850. But it's jumped almost over 11,000. So in a mature riding, first of all, do those numbers make sense to you?
They do and they don't. I think we have, so we do have some infill. Part of the revitalization of our area is that there are infill projects that are being encouraged in the neighborhood.
Like fourplexes? Duplexes?
We see mostly duplexes, but there are some fourplexes. It depends on the area. Like where we are closer to the stadium, it's mostly duplexes.
Okay.
I think part of it too is that a lot of our former residents are aging out and being replaced by larger families. So we bought our house from a widower who was single. He had at one point a family of 4, including himself, his wife, and his 2 children. And they bought the house from his father. So we have one of those little post-war bungalows.
Okay.
We bought it from the son of the original owner. And we're seeing a lot of our older neighborhoods either passing away or moving to extended care or something like that. And thankfully, we are seeing a lot of younger people move into our neighborhood, younger families or double income, no kids people like me and my husband that are taking over those houses. So I think 11,000 might be a little.
It seems a little high.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of flux. We are close to and part of the more diverse communities of like Boyle and Macaulay. We're adjacent to them. So there is, and I hesitate to use the word transient, but there is a bit of a transient population as far as rentals go that come and go. So I think there is kind of an ebb and flow to the population in our area. When I speak to mature, it's like the age of our houses are average, like between like Victorian era and post-war era, some mid-century modern houses and things like that. But generally, if you sit at the top of the stadium and you look over our neighborhood, you don't see roofs, you see the tops of trees.
Yeah.
So there is that mature aspect too.
Okay. That's a good word picture. Thank you. Julian?
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say that I really like the Parkdale Curling Club. So
Yeah. It's a beautiful neighborhood.
Yeah. So it's precisely that that makes me want to hear more about the different neighborhoods, because obviously the whole area south of the Kinnard Ravine and I think that's what it's called, right? Kinnard Ravine. And the old downtown Boyle Macaulay area is very, very different than what we see on the east side of Gretzky Drive on the one hand, and in the northeastern part of your riding. I mean, all of, those areas, the northeast part, is sort of classic old Edmonton. Lots of small bungalows and the like. And do you see a lot of infill and reno going on there?
We're seeing more of it, for sure. It depends on the area. Like if you get closer to Ada Boulevard and closer to the Highlands, there's less duplexing and more splitting of larger lots, so into 2 skinny homes. If you're in our area, we typically see duplexes. Sometimes we see the odd duplex with a legal basement suite being as a possibility, but not necessarily as a fourplex. We are starting to see, and I find this quite interesting, we're starting to see a lot of the older houses being torn down to build larger single-family dwellings, like more modern things, as opposed to a duplex. And I think it's because it's one of the last affordable, walkable, beautiful neighborhoods in the city. Like the average price of a single-family home is still around $250,000 to $300,000. And I think we're also seeing the younger generation, the Zennials, Millennials, they want more walkability, they want more community. So we're seeing an influx of, like, my metric is kind of, when we first moved into the neighborhood 10 years ago, we saw a lot of average cars, like my car, I have a Ford Escape. And now we're starting to see more high-end vehicles. We're seeing Land Rovers, we're seeing Mercedes and things like that. People want to be closer to the core. They don't necessarily want to be out in the suburbs. So I think there's a greater interest in our community. Also, the festivals draw people. And Alberta Ave is known particularly for its community league, and that draws a lot of people as well.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
There's a very large pod of underdeveloped land next to the, the exhibition center,
Mm-hmm.
where the old Northlands racetrack area was, and there was lots of little bungalows in there. I bought one of my favorite trucks from a guy in there, and now it's gone. The whole neighborhood right there is gone. So do you hear any conversation about development, residential development on that chunk of land?
I think the city's first priority is the Coliseum and that old site. And to your note, my dad was born and raised in Beverly when it was still its own town. So, but the history of the area is definitely more single-family housing. We do have some apartments. If you get north of 118th Ave, closer to the Yellowhead, you'll see more walk-up and more multifamily dwelling development there. Where we live on the south side of 118th Ave, we're just around, we're a few blocks from the stadium. It's still primarily single-family dwelling. And we're seeing more when houses used to sell, we'd see them sell, and then we'd see for rent signs go up quite quickly afterwards. And now we're seeing the opposite. They'll sell, and so we're seeing more owner-occupied properties. And part of the reason we bought the house in the area was because there is a very strong sense of community there. The revitalization planned by the city and by the communities involved was specifically intended to not avoid gentrification, but try to mitigate it and keep the community accessible to everyone that currently lives within it. And that was a draw for us as well. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of younger families are drawn to the area now, is because that sense of community and inclusiveness is very important to the younger generation. And I think it's beautiful because it's kind of a circle as the older people are aging out of their homes and these younger families are coming in and creating not a new, but a new and improved area. We're in Parkdale. We're right on the line between Alberta Ave and Parkdale and Eastwood, and the sense of community is we love our neighborhood more and more every day that we're there. It just grows and grows stronger and stronger and stronger. And a lot of that has to do with, you'll see, we belong to Parkdale, but we volunteer at the low-income tax clinic at Alberta Ave, and sometimes you'll see people from the Highlands Community League volunteering in other areas. It's very reciprocal and very much a shared, I think in a rough, more cerebral sense, we know our boundaries. We stray outside of them, obviously, because Uncle Ed's is on the other side of 50th Street, and they make really good pierogies. But I think because of the hardships that the community went through over the last 25, 30 years, it really bonded a lot of people, and it instilled in them that need to build a strong, sustainable community. You need to make sure that everybody's included in the decision-making process that are within our borders, from the most vulnerable to the most affluent. We see people from Ada Boulevard, donating things. I can't remember the family that owns Northline Construction. They donated their mansion to Concordia University for historic reasons. And that kind of community exists within the whole community, regardless of your socioeconomic background. Yeah.
I'll just add, Highlands Norwood is almost exactly on average, which is not to say it is an average constituency by any other measure, but numerically, it tracks almost exactly the average. So we always struggle with where to start in drawing these maps, but what I'm hearing and just looking and observing the lines, it certainly appears to have some fairly natural boundaries. North and south in particular, but even east and west and kind of community-wise. So, okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay,
so
thank you.
The message you want us to hear is don't touch your boundaries,
Yes.
The population is in the
Yes.
right zone.
Yes.
And even if it weren't, don't touch your boundaries.
I mean, if we were to see suddenly more of our houses going from, single owner occupied, retiree occupied to like like 4 people or whatever, and we were suddenly at the peak of the post-war era where it was the veterans coming home with their wives and their newborn kids, and every house had like a husband and wife or 2 partners, I should say, and their 2.5 children. And we doubled in size, absolutely, then it's time to take a look at that. But I'd say between now and maybe the next election or the next need for a boundary expansion, there's really no need to consider that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Okay. Next presenter, Robert Jarman.
That will be me.
Okay, Mr. Jarman, just have a seat.
Whenever my time commences.
It can commence now, and we have probably told you that you're limited to 7 minutes, but we're somewhat flexible, and we'll let you go further if need be. So introduce yourself, tell us what constituency you're from, and go ahead.
Edmonton South, which I believe that Aaron here is getting on the screen, which I might point to with my dad's laser pointer for cats from time to time. I'm just shy of 25 years old, and I graduated from J. Percy Page High School and went to MacEwan University and University of Alberta for about a year. Any other details required for the introduction?
No, that's fine. And tell us what, so.
All right.
Please proceed.
And so, if this is working. Maybe it's not. Don't know. Whatever. You can, on this map here, you can see that there is a part of the riding that's north of freeway. That would be quite irritating for anyone who has limited access to transportation other than cars to get across. And especially given that I'm in the demographic that, while I personally have regular access to motor vehicles, a lot of people don't. My younger sister is actually ineligible to get one, even though she's old enough. So that's a bit of a problem. And also having parts of a riding or a campaign that needs to go over a road like this, like a river that most of the bridges are freeways like this. That can back up really badly due to traffic or to construction or both, obviously. I imagine that Commissioner Clark here remembers the pain that happens when you try to campaign across these sorts of things, the way that volunteers have to go across them at weird hours of the day. I was personally campaigning for the NDP in my riding in Edmonton Southwest in 2023, and I often had to go across the Henday. I don't know if, where any of you live in order to be familiar with where you with the Henday here, but where I personally live, it's the most obvious way to get onto that freeway is the right in, right out. So I can't go west on that road without a big detour that can be quite subjective to congestion. And during campaign season, where every day can count in a short period of a month, that's not ideal to have. As well, I was asked by some other volunteers for the working with the NDP last 10 days ago, maybe? And that sounds about right. To point out that it's not a good thing to break up communities that might have ties to national origin or ethnicity or age, seniority, senior citizen, younger citizens, people who go to the same school, if possible, these sorts of links that people already have built in, these social networks that people get via these communities of interest, that can be the basis of campaigning or coming up with ideas, petitions for whatever may be relevant. That Citizens Initiative Act, I read the thing last week, all of it, and it mentions that there are some requirements to make these sorts of things across individual ridings, getting a certain fraction in certain ridings, 2/3 ridings. And so having the ability to have these networks within the riding that's not broken up, that's really useful for people to be able to use these sorts of rights that they may have. I think that Commissioner Miller has a question.
No, I was, well, I probably do, but I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, okay. What else was I going to say? And the city of Edmonton, as well as other cities, St. Albert in particular, is getting aggressive on this. Aggressive negotiations is not the right word. They want to increase transportation for availability and safety for people who are using non-motorized means like bicycles, their own 2 feet. And so looking at which roads here have safe means to get parallel with them and on them, that's useful. Oh, and one other thing I just remembered I was going to mention is that when you put a riding boundary on a big road like this, on one side of the road, you'll have probably signs or candidates from one riding, and on the opposite side, when you're going down the same road as the other way, when you're getting back home or wherever, a few hours later, you're probably seeing a different candidate, even at the same party. The colors of the party and these symbols probably help, but it can be a bit confusing for some people, especially those who don't particularly pay attention to politics too much. If not, maybe try to go for rivers or the biggest roads that no one can put a sign next to anyway, like the Henday or other freeways, maybe Fox Drive, for instance, Edmonton, or Shaganappy Trail in Calgary, perhaps. Yeah, I believe that's 7 minutes, something like that.
Okay. So let me stop you. Just remain at the seat. Any questions, Mr. Clark?
I hesitate to preempt your potential question, but one of the discussion points has been naming. So Edmonton South is specific, but also very general. Any thoughts on if we were to come up with a different name for Edmonton South, what might make some sense?
Edmonton Black Mud might be a good name for this riding. Alternatively, Black Mud, White Mud might be an option, given it's more easy to disambiguate these areas. Pretty much, this is pretty much the only riding where it will be obvious that those two ravines interact with each other. Alternatively, Edmonton Heritage Valley might be another option, or Heritage Valley. Oh,
somebody else suggested that earlier today, so that's why I laughed. So
okay, sure.
That may have some potential.
Edmonton South Henday might be another option, but that could be confused with Edmonton Ellerslie. Edmonton Ellerslie is an annoying term, given that this the riding I live in and the one immediately to the west also has Ellerslie Road in it. So that might be names to not conflict too much if you can avoid it. Maybe Edmonton Airport, possibly, but that's a bit of a stretch.
Okay.
Does that answer that question, Mr. Clark?
It does, thank you.
Questions?
No, I just wanted to say that I agree with you about the whole area that's north of the Henday. I don't know for a fact, but it sure looks to me like that was done in order to make up the numbers. It's hard to conceive of it, but 10 years ago, Edmonton South was too small.
Yeah.
And it's just a function of what has changed and changed so fast. So I think, I can't speak for my other commissioners, but that area north of the Henday has got to be a target puzzle for us to solve. And I appreciate your remarks about the transportation awkwardnesses that it generates. I also was interested in your remarks about transportation corridors more generally. And so do you feel that south of the Henday, that there are adequate transportation corridors for people who are on foot?
On this map here, that area on LP Road that's to the west of where that right in, right out comes in on the freeway.
Yeah.
Over to the bus barn over there, the eco station as well. That does not actually have a shared path or similar kinds of paths. And so if you want to go that way on pedal or foot, you're walking on the left side of the roadway like you're right over my mother, which she can tell you is not a good idea.
Can I push you even further and say, how would you get to the east part of this current riding on foot?
Across 22?
Yeah.
There are some concrete walks that do go that way. My father often cycles or has tried cycling from our house in Black Knight Creek at times to the area by that Costco on 93rd Street.
Yeah.
So it's not super accurate for this. And there are some ways to get that way, but he's a constant guy at time like 45. Not something that you would probably do if you were a volunteer for a party at least like 15.
So really the only way to get here is on Eversley Road, right? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Also, the only other way that you can really do that would be to go way out to 41st.
Yeah, and take the overpass. I did that this morning, so I know that. Thank you.
Also something with these transportation lanes, I realized that in the Transportation Safety Act, Traffic Safety Act regulations, apparently it's not illegal to have your doors open on a minivan, while you're driving, and so that was actually quite a useful way to put signs out.
Safety first.
However, I did that at times of the day, like 6 a.m. Thursday back then, so I got at that hour, so I wasn't having traffic issues. And usually on the collector roads, which are not good anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, I remember you made a comment about the last time that the district was zoned like 2017 was too small. I definitely remember being about 16 years old at that time, and I remember that this area where Harris Valley is, that was where my parents parked their camping trailer around where that Bill Canyon Superstore is now at 41st Avenue. Anything else?
I just wanted to say, Robert, I've really enjoyed your comments on transportation and how that affects the average person living in that riding. You brought up points I hadn't considered, and so thank you for that.
Yeah. I've actually been to Netherlands where I've personally ridden around Amsterdam Central Station at 1 a.m. in the morning, and it was perfectly safe. And I don't mean just from robberies, also the traffic.
Right.
And I've had quite a deep interest in this sort of thing for the last 12 years by now, almost.
Yeah.
Even once spoken from the city council and another hearing in a similar way, according to my phone time.
Okay.
Good on you.
Well, Robert, thank you very much. I did have some questions, but my colleagues asked them before I could. So, and you've answered them. Thank you very much. And please remain for the rest of the presentation.
Oh, okay. Why am I being asked to stay here?
No. You're more than welcome to hear. Yeah. So don't feel you have to leave.
Oh,
Okay. Stephen Rates?
I have to get back to my dad.
Okay, okay.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
All right, thank you.
I don't really comment. Oh, okay.
Before you start, okay, so this is just regarding that particular area where it's empty right now, so much construction happening, between 127 and, a site for a hospital, that city has been planning with, it costs us money very much yet. And then there's or keep coming down to that area as well. So I expect to get it more denser than it is right now.
Like right here?
Yeah. There's construction happening, roads are being built. It's crazy, that is right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name's Stephen Rates. I'm a resident of Edmonton. I live closer to the core. I'm also an urban planner, and I'm an Art of Queen student just about to become a lawyer. But the reason I wanted to join today is back in 2019 to 2020, I was part of the City of Edmonton's Ward Boundary Commission. And so I thought it'd be helpful to share some of the lessons learned from that regarding Edmonton, and also provide a couple of suggestions moving forward. And so, yeah, the big points I'd want to make is just the lesson learned around balancing population growth, and then the two broader suggestions around a clear line of communications between local to provincial jurisdictions, and also finding ways to respect ex-urban or rural representation. And so for my first point around lessons learned, and this is, I think, common across all ward boundary commissions, you're striving to find ways to balance areas of really high growth with more stable growth. And so this is something we really try to do, because if you have a pocket that's only high growth that you create as an electoral district, by the end of the 10 years or so, you have MLAs representing thousands of more people than other MLAs, and so it's an access to governance and engagement and democracy sort of issue that you can nip in the bud by trying to balance that high growth with stable growth. And so that was something we really strove to do by kind of making almost like swimming lane pool districts or wards locally, balancing older parts of the city with newer parts of the city. And so that's the lesson learned. But the two latter points I have are related to the change in the legislation that the government introduced, kind of taking away the restriction on you folks from creating districts that reach from inside the city of Edmonton to outside of the city of Edmonton. And I'm not here to quibble with that legislative change. I think it's a recognition that the government respects the commission's discretion and your decision-making abilities. I would just suggest that if you are going to investigate making electoral districts from inside of Edmonton to outside of Edmonton, that you really put thoughtful consideration into that first. And the two sort of considerations that I posit for you folks today are those clear lines of communication, and then also respecting rural or ex-urban representation. So for that first one, I think that's a really common one that'll come up, is that if you have districts that stretch across fewer municipalities or stick within one municipality, it's easier for residents, voters, MLAs to understand what each other are talking about, because they're all kind of located within one jurisdiction. There's that broader jurisdictional reason to strive for this kind of coherence of, prime examples provincially of jurisdiction are like schools and hospitals. So especially in cities, the schools and the hospitals you're going to are the ones within your community, your city, and not necessarily outside of them. And so it's just easier for MLAs, I think, or when they have a voter or resident coming in the door, to know if that residence is within their electoral district. They know where that concern is coming from more clearly, and in a time of, limited attention spans, constant news, and also like weak understanding of jurisdiction overall, it's, that coherence that comes from same provincial boundaries respecting local boundaries is something that shouldn't be frittered away too easily. And so for my last point, just around protecting rural or ex-urban representation, making districts that are going to stretch from those really explosively growing suburban communities on the edge of Edmonton or Calgary's boundaries and balancing those really explosive areas with more stable growth that's occurring in rural areas is going to erode rural voices over time. And so this goes back to my first point around you want to balance those stable with high growth to ensure that over the 10 years you have less of that variance across electoral districts. But the issue with doing that across the city boundary is that, you know, at the start of the process, you might have 25,000 residents within the city boundary and 25,000 residents within the rural areas. But by the end of the 10 years, just based on how demographic and migratory patterns are working right now, you're going to have a district that might have 50,000 within the city and 30,000 within the rural area. And so it erodes the rural representation over time. And I can think even personally, it's my experience, like growing up in Leduc, like the kids who grew up in the county, like got bused in from farms and acreages to go to school with me, having grown up in the city, went to schools in Leduc. They didn't go to schools in Edmonton, and so I think it's easier to balance that rural area with some of the smaller suburban communities around, because that's where you have those communities of interest. And to bring the law into this just at the last minute, that's really what the big takeaway from the Supreme Court case regarding this within Canada is, that reference Saskatchewan electoral boundaries decision from the early 90s. It's not trying to strive for perfectly equal ridings with equal numbers of people. It start with the focus on communities of interest, those local boundaries, focus on that geography, and then try to strive for population balance over time, trying to balance high and stable growth. And I think there's good examples that you folks can look to federally. Edmonton Gateway and Edmonton Riverbend are, I think, really good examples of balancing that more stable part of the city with the higher growth of the city, but not extending beyond the city. And locally, this is kind of shouting out our commission's work, but Ipikokaniki or Wargario or more examples, or Nakota Isga on the west end of the city, provided some south end examples, but the west end, Nakota Isga is another good example of stretch from the core of the city out, and you'll have, I think, better balance over time. Just two final notes to plug. Really encourage the commission to be really transparent with its data and its reasoning. I think recent reports did that well, and the city's report did that too. And so that's just good from an accountability perspective and lessons learned from next time. And so we'll just wrap up by concluding and thanking the staff for helping facilitate this event, and also thanking you folks for your kind of did it at a local level. And I know it's a lot of work for you folks, but appreciate the public service that you're doing. And so I'll open it up to any questions if you have.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for your presentation, and it's good to know that you know what we're going through in a on a smaller scale.
All the power to you.
Quick question. Yeah. How many wards in Edmonton?
How many wards? I think it's 20, or like within municipal?
Yes. Yeah.
There's 12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's not a good like for like, because I would say there's like 20 to 25 eventually. But even, you know, in that, it's a pretty, almost an even like doubling of the wards, or you have twice as many provincial districts as you do municipal. So looking into splitting some of those in some ways might be good.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm envious of only having 12 classes. Right?
You guys got 89.
But similar issues, and I wanted to probe you further on the concept which you've deployed really about high growth areas balancing out with stable areas. That's a lovely way to think about some of these areas. I almost said district, but that's a different concept. But in each of your three examples, you said the same thing. You said, hey, if you're talking about this topic, then balanced, stable with high growth. And so that seems to work for you and your colleagues in most cases, let's say. Now, what to you constitutes stable growth? Less than 5% over an interval of time? I mean, how did you determine that?
I think it's all kind of relative in a way. It's like the more stable growth, I guess, like compared with the edges of the city where it's just completely new communities growing there, like the growth might be upwards of 50 to like 100% within particular quarter sections or that kind of thing, like 1,000% even within, if you're looking at that scale. But yeah, I think maybe less, you probably have the data to like see how you might see it evolve, but maybe less focused on the metrics and more about like the circumstances. It's those built out areas of the city that might not be near transit corridors, like mass transit corridors, like the LRT lines, where the city is trying to target additional growth. Those stable areas are going to be the existing built out areas that aren't along some of those targeted growth corridors that follow transit lines and that kind of thing. So that like the local planning around this, like at the city level, like the city's municipal development plan, will help kind of define, they'll look at that right area of the city where there's less growth overall because it's not the suburbs. And then you'll be able to kind of cleave off, okay, if this is along a transit line, then the growth is actually going to be probably a bit higher than average there because the city's trying to target growth there, whereas the areas outside of those transit corridors would probably be that stable growth that you're looking to balance into it. So hopefully that's clear. I can't give you a number though, so I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
that's perfectly fine. Thank you.
Okay. Sweet. Greg, any questions?
No, I think that's really helpful. And that's, again, just echo Dr. Martin, sort of the framing of the fast but slow is a helpful way.
Yeah, and I know you're not asking me a question, but I realized that I should communicate one last point. Like from an order of operations perspective, I think it is really important to start with that communities and geography, and then use that mathematical approach of balancing the high and low growth at the end. I think if you focus on the numbers first, then you miss some of those community considerations that you really want to drive this work. And so, yeah, I'm glad I communicated the message of balance high and stable, but start with communities of interest and local boundaries, and then work here, and then try to balance it later on. So, yeah, sorry to slip that in at the end, but hopefully that's clear now.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good. Leah Markowitz. Good evening. Please have a seat and introduce yourself.
So my name is Lee Makarowitz, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be heard this evening. You're going very late this evening. Good for you. Just for a bit of perspective on where my mindset comes from, I'm a born and bred Edmontonian who grew up in Millwoods. I got married in Millwoods. We raised our daughter in Millwoods. She's now a homeowner with her husband in Millwoods. You sense a theme here. Over the decades, I've served in many volunteer capacities in the area, including the Greenview Parent Advisory Council, the North Melbourne Community League, the Millwoods Cultural and Recreational Facility Association, and I'm currently the chair of the Jackie Parker Park Sensory Playground Community and a senator with the University of Alberta. I served at the pleasure of a member of Parliament for Edmonton Millwoods from 2015 to 2019, and I'm deeply connected to many of the cultural organizations, not-for-profits, and charities that serve the area. It is my lifelong relationship with this community that brings me here today, and I hope that the Commission has an opportunity to hear from someone like me from every part of the province. But if not, the principles will translate to other areas, and I would respectfully ask the Commission that they make sure to seek out these kinds of community nuances before drawing lines on a map. In the last federal boundary redistribution, a decision was made to cut the northwest portion of Millwoods off into Edmonton Gateway and away from Edmonton Southeast. This small change has disenfranchised the neighborhoods of North Millbourne, Leafield, and Lakewood from the remainder of the Millwoods area. What difference does that make? Well, when it comes to governmental representation, it makes a big difference. The common community interests that make areas unique in Edmonton are based on a number of factors, such as individual neighborhood and community leagues, as well as groupings into community league districts and associations such as the Southeast Seniors Association and the Millwoods President's Council. These groups work to develop relationships with the elected representatives in their area and often struggle to be heard if there is a perceived overlap or gap. An ill-conceived boundary, as was established in the last federal redistribution, impacts the clarity needed for residents to understand where and how they should access their government. I can tell you from experience, the first question constituency offices ask people reaching out to them is, what is your address? And most who have reached out to the wrong office are adamant that they should be in the riding because that is where they believe they belong. And most often that sense of belonging comes from a feeling of distinct association with the area that they perceive as being a part of their neighborhood based on common needs and services. South Edmonton is growing by leaps and bounds, not only through sprawl development, but a dedicated for them. I thank you again for your time and your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have to the best of my ability.
Thank you very much. Millwoods has got good representation here today.
It's kind of it's an ongoing frustration, we'll call it.
Okay. Questions, Julian?
No, I don't. Other than to reiterate the notion that the sense of belonging, as you nicely put it, is something, a theme we've heard all day. So I think this is particularly strong in Millwoods as opposed to other places. And I commend you and others in the community for constructing and maintaining that.
There was a period of time where if Millwoods had separated from Edmonton, it would have been the third largest city in the province. Now that was many years ago. I'm getting a little old, but it's still that itself, and the province, when a previous government wanted to shut down the Grey Nuns, we had tens of thousands of people coming out to support the need for that kind of growth in Millwoods. That spirit still.
I was talking to a gentleman briefly a few weeks back who said, hey, there's more of us things here than in Brampton. Right? So the sense
I think I know every single one of them.
and so the sense of belonging extends to newer people coming into this area, as well as the folks who've been here for 40 years.
Absolutely, because we have ethnic groups that have been around for those 40 years and have just grown and built and have a need for those services and those examples to be a continual part. And like I say, that cutoff of North Melbourne and Leafield actually affected our Muslim and our Somali populations.
Great. Just maybe, if you wouldn't mind just reiterating your comments on some of the federal examples, not even specifically to Mill Woods, but I think you've mentioned Elk Island and some of those. I guess I'm interested in your perspective on what does that community of interest mean in terms of different parts of,
so I think
is it just like geography, or is there more to it?
The gentleman was saying before, when you talk about sort of trying to find those percentages, if you do sort of a hub and spoke model that takes a large central, whether it's Edmonton or Calgary or Fort McMurray, and kind of go, oh, we'll just kind of jog off of it, and that's how we'll get the numbers to work, it actually does a disservice to both urban and rural. Because, at the time that it was Millwoods and Beaumont, that aspect, Beaumont is a French language hub, and Millwoods was not. And here, David Kilgore, Mike Lake were trying to represent those areas in a way that they, had competing interests, right? And could not be as effective as if they spoke loudly and clearly for one or the other.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for using and reflecting on the federal boundary changes and how that affects the people on the ground at the provincial level. And I think it really drills back home how we have to be so sensitive on so many fronts. And again, to remind us that of all the overlays we look at, population will probably be the last. Like, it might be the first trigger that makes us look at Millwood, but it's the last overlay to make sure we got it right.
Really, really is. And I mean, serving with Millwood's President's Council, and I mean, that basically is the council of all of the community leagues of Millwood. That organization has been around, again, for approximately 40 years, working together to speak in unison. And then all of a sudden, some get cut off, but they're still trying to speak in unison over here. It's even just the simple things, like you have a small organization that wants to invite their representation. Well, what happens? One representative is like, oh, I'm busy, you go instead. And they don't get that fulsome coverage and understanding from their representatives when 2 or 3 are overlapped in the same area. Makes it easier for them, don't get me wrong. Yeah.
Well, speaking of population, the numbers we're looking at, and we don't have the Millwood map up there, but 2017's Boundary Commission relied on a population of 50,265. This time around, we're relying on a population of 58,725. So it's in that target range, and you're asking, look, don't touch our boundaries, leave them the way they are, realizing we have to move some borders around.
There's some jiggery-pokery that needs to be done for sure, and those outlying areas. I mean, we now talk about Millwoods and meadows, right? Ellerslie usually falls, to the south, and that's a bit different. But Millwoods and meadows, and those newer areas, I consider them to be new, but I also consider anything south of 23rd Avenue to be new. So those newer areas are busting with new growth and development. But in those older areas, the infill programs that have come through surplus school sites and these initiatives through the city, and also a real promotion of private development. So, for example, in North Millbourne, we have 2 surplus school sites bringing in an additional 250 homes into the area. Plus, now there is a private development that's going to be bringing in a 4 to 6 story apartment building, which is going to bring in another 250 to 300 units, never mind people, but units, into, just a neighborhood community within a one intersection area, all kitty corner to each other, because we had huge amounts of green space, and then a commercial development that, times change. So it's not just the growth out, it's that growth up as well.
Contrast is the gateway to clarity, and what you've done is you've shown us don't make the mistake that the peasants
Please,
made.
I'm begging.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lloyd Osler.
Good evening. Let me say thank you for having the opportunity to present to you this evening. For us seniors, it's almost past our bedtime, so you know how serious we are about this. Just listening to the former presenter, we did not coordinate our thoughts at all, but there are some similarities. I'd like to share with you the perspective as a longtime Millwoods resident. My wife and I moved here in 1981, raised our family in this vibrant community. After selling our home to our children and spending 12 years in a condo elsewhere, we returned to the Knottwood area in 2019, drawn back by the sense of community we'd known and loved. Today, we are part of 3 generations living here. We have built the first garage suite in the community as part of the infill kinds of things that is happening out there, and we both serve as senior representatives on our community board. I personally have been involved in the community in all the years that we're there, and many nonprofit organizations, both political and non-political, so really been involved in the community for a long time. Our story illustrates the deep roots that bind communities together. Let me share a concrete example of how those bonds create positive change. Recently, the Knottwood Community League, made up of Dakota, Manissa, and Satu neighborhoods, worked diligently to build the Knottwood Community Center. It wasn't just another building project. It represented the power of a united community. Through local board efforts and support from all 3 levels of government who genuinely understood our needs, we created a facility that now is booked through the summer of 26 for weddings and events. It's become a model for community leagues across Edmonton. The significance of that is the whole issue of various diverse groups. Millwoods is made up of so many different groups. Our home was known as the United Nations when our kid was growing up, because we never knew who or from what kind of ethnic background was going to show up at the door, but they were all welcome. And I think that's a community spirit that really stands strong in this particular community. This success story brings me to the core concerns about the proposed electoral boundary changes. First, population growth demands attention, and we've heard that. New seats should reflect current and projected growth, particularly in South Edmonton area, Millwoods, and the adjacent areas, and North Calgary as well. Recent data shows Millwoods maintained consistent representation at about a 7% level in 2017. I think you were referring to that just a few minutes ago, and remains in the 6.9 again today, which is within the average growth, I think, throughout the province. So there's not big population blow up here or elsewhere. Second, municipality integrity matters. Cities and towns should remain whole within ridings. Each municipality faces unique challenges requiring dedicated representation, breaking them apart to lose their voice and effectiveness. A previous speaker mentioned that as well. The issue is you need, even from the point of view of those that are representing as an MLA, how do you represent a constituency that is so different on this end of it and over here? So that doesn't make a lot of sense. There is the issue of what is the kind of general community and needs of the group, and try to keep those within the context of boundaries. I know you're going to have to move some, but we all know that. That's the reality of what we're faced with. But just to keep that in mind. Third, and most critically, we must preserve what's called like communities, and that's what I was referring to, areas sharing cultural, economic, and geographic bonds. The recent removal of restrictions on maintaining municipality boundaries raising serious concerns. Expanding urban ridings to include rural areas risks diluting the social, cultural, and historical identity that makes communities like Millwoods unique and effective. And I think that applies across the province. Again, it's a challenge you are really having to face. Considering our community center project, this success relied on representatives who understood our local context, our shared services, our cultural makeup, and our history. And kudos to all levels of government, both municipal, the provincial, and federal government. This understanding doesn't happen by chance. It comes from maintaining coherent community boundaries that represent natural connection. And that previous speaker spoke to that as well, but I can't underscore that enough, how important that is. Our community strength lies in its shared identity, its diverse population, and its collective spirit. These aren't just words, they're the foundation of real achievements like our community center. Arbitrary boundaries changes that ignore these connections risk more than just lines on a map. They risk the very essence of effective community representation. Finally, the issue of transparency. Never before in our history as a country and as a province has the need of transparency been greater. We live in a time when populist politicians, when not getting what the outcome desired, create conspiracies and spread misinformation to undermine our very democratic process. The committee and its work must be transparent and to the best of its ability consider fair and equitable boundary outcomes that leave us with a sense of what is right and fair, rather than expedient or worse yet, gerrymandered. And I know that comes up in these kinds of things all the time. I do not envy your task. I do believe that you're going to do the best you possibly can. I just want to make it, as clear as a long-term resident of this particular community and others ones where we have these kinds of mix, that there are overriding issues that we need to consider possibly first and foremost. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Olson.
Question?
Well, we've got that problem with the population over the baseline of 55,000. And what we heard tonight over the span of many speakers is how tight Millwoods is, and geographically, like with the curved roads and the tight community leads. And I really see a challenge here to get that electoral division within a number after we have the other considerations.
As I said, I don't envy your challenges for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have placed an exclamation mark on the Millwood submissions today. Thank you. Thank you. I believe that leaves us with one more. Raki Pancholi. Good evening.
Good evening. Way to put a politician between you and the end of your night. I do know that
That's why you're familiar. Sorry.
That's great. I know it's been a long day for all of you, so I thank you so much for your time and your commitment and your dedication to listening to all the presenters. And while I only managed to capture listening to a few of the presenters before me, I'm certain you've had some very passionate, articulate, dedicated people speaking today. And so thank you for your work. A little warm in here too. You guys are staying awake all night. Good for you. Okay, I'm not even a senior and it's close to my bedtime. So good evening, everyone. My name is Raki Pancholi. I'm proud to serve as the MLA for the constituency of Edmonton Whitemud. I've had the honor of representing the over 45,000 people of Edmonton Whitemud for 6 years now. Today, I want to present to you 3 principles that I believe the Commission needs to consider as you undertake your important work. As you know, the provincial government recently passed legislation establishing that 2 new provincial ridings will be created in Alberta, increasing the number of seats from 87 to 89. This increase doesn't accurately reflect the significant increase in population that Alberta has experienced in the last 2 years alone, leave alone since the last time the number of ridings has changed. However, given that 2 new ridings will be created, the first principle that I would like the Commission to consider is that these 2 new constituencies should be added where current and future population growth demands it. That is in South Edmonton and North Calgary. As the MLA for a riding in South Edmonton, I can tell you that there has been a significant population increase in this area of the city in the last 5 years. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that and you have the numbers to prove that as well. Now, if you look at a map of my constituency of Edmonton Whitemud, you will see that the riding has some natural and man-made boundaries that make it quite discrete. The north and west side of the riding are marked by the North Saskatchewan River Valley, beautiful river valley. The east side is marked by Whitemud Creek, and the south is marked out primarily by Anthony Henday Drive. Edmonton-Whitemud itself has not actually increased in population because, quite frankly, there isn't much land to develop or to build new housing on in the riding. If you look at within the boundaries, we don't actually have a lot of industrial or commercial land. It's almost all zoned residential, and it's quite dense and it's residential. So 45,000 constituents in a pretty small geographic level. However, the people of Edmonton-Whitemud have absolutely felt the effects of significant population increase in the areas of South Edmonton all around us. 3 of the 10 Edmonton public schools that had to go to a lottery for enrollment in the 2025-26 school year are in Edmonton-Whitemud. Going to a lottery means that the schools are so over capacity that there isn't enough space for all the students who live in that school's attendance area. It means that families, some of whom who could see the school from their front doors, had to wait to see if their child's name was randomly drawn to attend the neighborhood school. And I heard from many of them when their child's name wasn't selected, and they now have to bus over an hour to another school. Along with Edmonton-Whitemud, these schools serve students living in neighboring ridings like Edmonton Southwest or Edmonton South, where the number of schools has not kept pace with the unbelievable population growth. Similarly, my constituents have to travel further and wait longer for access to hospital and emergency services as the city grows more and more dense to the south, and there's only one hospital, the Grey Nuns, to serve it. Transportation congestion and challenges, whether by car, public transit, or biking, are also faced by my constituents as more and more Edmontonians in the south of the city are traveling north for work or for school every single day. There is no doubt in my mind that the extraordinary population growth in South Edmonton should be a key consideration when determining where new ridings should be established. Now, the second principle I'd like the Commission to consider when redrawing electoral boundaries is that provincial boundaries should align with municipal boundaries. This is very important for a number of reasons, but I'll focus on just one today. And actually, I'd like to give credit right now to the presenters before me who often spoke very articulately on a number of various reasons about why you want to keep electoral boundaries consistent with the community and understanding of their neighborhoods. So the communities inside of Edmonton have different needs than smaller communities outside of Edmonton. You heard a little bit of that discussed today. In my role as an MLA, I've had the chance to travel to many different parts of the province. I like to say I've knocked doors on more than half of the constituencies in this province. I've been to communities like Leduc, Beaumont, and Wetaskiwin. These communities are beautiful and thriving, but smaller communities have their own needs, challenges, and culture. As an MLA, I can tell you that the possibility of representing part of the city of Edmonton and also representing a small town or smaller city would be a significant challenge, one which could place my constituents at odds with each other. In particular, infrastructure needs can be very different, and the different municipalities can often be asking the province for 2 different outcomes on the same issues, such as land annexation, infrastructure projects, transportation priorities, etc. It makes more sense to link towns of similar sizes together. I think Beaumont, Leduc, and Devon would find they have more synergies with each other than any of them would have with parts of Edmonton. I think that's also true for Morinville and Gibbons on the north end of the city, and Spruce Grove and Stony Plain to the west. It's not surprising that when you look at how municipalities across our province have chosen to organize themselves for advocacy purposes, they often choose to do so based on the size of the municipalities that they represent. For example, mid-sized cities have often found that they have more in common with each other, regardless of where they're located across the province, than with larger cities like Edmonton and Calgary. Smaller municipalities like Leduc, Beaumont, Spruce Grove, Morinville all deserve to have their own representation in the legislature, to not have their voices diluted by being grouped together with parts of Edmonton. And communities in Edmonton also deserve to have representation that reflects their day-to-day priorities as part of a major urban municipality. The third principle that I would like the Commission to consider is that communities need to be kept together. What I mean by that is that if there is a neighborhood that has the same community league or a cultural community that visits the same local temple or gurdwara or church, these communities should be kept intact and not split up across ridings. We just heard some great presentations from many individuals from Millwoods who spoke specifically about this. I'm asking you as commissioners, when you are creating the new boundary map, I urge you to not just look at hard boundaries like roads and rivers, but to also look at the way that people live their lives. What services do they use? Where do they travel to for work? Where do they recreate? Where do they do their community work or volunteering? Or where do they find the support that they need? What community organizations or school boards serve that community? The work in front of you is no small task. and the integrity of our democracy relies on how this map is drawn. Albertans are counting on you, and I thank you for your work and your service on behalf of them. And I'd also like to thank all the staff, and I know it's been a long day, but I'd like to thank the staff as well who are helping out on this commission. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
That's a lot of pressure.
No pressure.
No.
I'll be between you and the end of the day.
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to come up, because I know you're busy too.
Thank you.
White mud map we can put up. I've got it in front of me. Sorry.
Of course.
Thank you for that submission. We do appreciate you making time to join us. One of the previous presenters, and as you note, tremendous growth south of Whitemud, and Whitemud itself is quite a stable community. So one of the things we've heard just recently is perhaps considering blending some of those or putting together high growth and more stable growth areas. And you're right, you know, Whitemud is slightly below the averages that we're targeting at 54,900. Whitemud's about 50,000, trending to grow not quite as quickly as other areas. So in that context, I guess I just wanted to sound you out on if you had an opinion on sort of additions and subtractions, if you will. One of the ideas is, I've got it right. Apologies.
I feel like I want to anticipate what you're going to say.
Yeah,
I'll let you say it first because I have a feeling.
I just want to make sure I've got this right before I decide. I'm talking. Okay, that comes out of somewhere else. Never mind. But so essentially, so let's just go north of Ellerslie Road. That's what you were thinking I was going to say. And there's sort of a big kind of bump up that goes along the ravine, kind of bites into Whitemud. Is that sort of logically connected or not? Or what are your thoughts?
There certainly was in the last electoral boundary review. There was a portion of Edmonton Whitemud that was carved out to become part of Edmonton South. Yes. So the neighborhoods would be known as McGrath and McTaggart. And so certainly it feels logical, I would say, that those would be areas that would perhaps, if we're looking to reach a number of about 55,000 per riding. I don't know what the exact population number for those two additional areas would be, but they seem to be a more natural fit while also keeping communities together. As I mentioned, there's a lot of these natural boundaries around Edmonton Whitemud, and so to add further to the west or to the east or to the north, frankly, means you'd be skipping over into very different geographic parts of the city, just simply by where the river valley and the Whitemud Creek goes. So while I don't want to presuppose where the commission will go in terms of growth, I certainly have anticipated the possibility that those areas and those neighborhoods used to be part of Edmonton Whitemud. And
you'd be happy to take them back.
Well, they're lovely people. I'd take them all even if they weren't, but they are lovely people.
Because you've been, you indicated you've been around the province and you're familiar with other constituencies. A constant theme that I'm hearing as a Southern representative on the commission is absolutely no to blended or hybrid riding in the Edmonton region. Okay. But would you acknowledge that in some parts of the province, people actually like them or don't mind them, and we have to use them, have to utilize that option?
Well, I'm not going to dispute that it might be challenging as a commission with only 2 new ridings. I think the challenge is that South Edmonton has grown to such an extent that, frankly, it doesn't require blending with other communities outside of the municipality of Edmonton in order to have appropriate representation. So to me, I think given the population growth, particularly in southern Alberta, southern Edmonton, and when I look at North Calgary, you could create or adapt the boundaries of those ridings to make it more fairly represent population and demographics and communities without having to add in the additional challenge of then bringing in other municipalities. Now, certainly we know there are many constituencies across the province that do have these splits between sort of an urban, I think of Medicine Hat, the 2 ridings there. Now, I've spent a fair bit of time at Medicine Hat, and I can tell you, I think there is that tension that exists, and it becomes a bit of a battle between the constituents who live in the city proper versus those who are in the outside communities, outside the city communities, who do have very different needs. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from lots of them if you haven't already, about some will like it and some won't.
Next Friday in the morning.
I'm sure. And, you know, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for all of us as representatives to be considering the interests of communities that don't look exactly like ours. But the challenge is always, as elected officials, that we're there to represent our constituents and their interests. And while we don't expect unanimity from them in terms of how they view things, you don't certainly want them to be at odds with each other simply because of where they live. They're going to have different views no matter what, right, within your constituencies. I'm not saying everybody will get along or agree on everything. But if it's simply because of where they're located, and it's, for example, competing for transportation priorities or infrastructure priorities, I certainly don't think it serves good representation to have your elected official having to manage those diverse outcomes. And I do want to mention, several of the other presenters added it, and I do think it's worth noting. You know, Edmonton and certainly Calgary as well. Calgary is the third most diverse city in the country. Edmonton is fourth most diverse city in the country in terms of visible minority representation. That makes a difference. I look at my constituency and 46% of my constituents are identified as a visible minority. It's a very different makeup than some of the smaller communities. Not good, not bad, just is, right? Just different. And those interests might serve differently as well. So I think we want to have most effective representation, especially as we are increasing potentially the number of constituents that we're all representing. Let's not build in more opportunities for divergent needs based on location rather than on the needs of the citizens.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for closing out our day today.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And thank you for everyone for your presentations. And we're going to adjourn till tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock.
In a different hotel.
Somewhere else. Different hotel. Yeah.
The other side of the room.